And just as a quick background, it might be interesting to note that Elinor Ostrom, in one of her last published articles before her death, talked about the importance of polycentric governance. The idea that it might actually be easier with a big collective action problem like climate change to break it down into smaller components, working at multiple levels, and that these smaller components, a renewable energy plan, local level activities, and city networks might actually be able to be linked together in such a way that they can help towards realizing the goals of what we need in trying to reach a 2-degree or 1.5-degree target. Within Europe already since 2007 has had what is known as the 20-20-20 by 2020 plans. This is 20% CO2 emission reductions, 20% energy efficiency improvements, and 20% renewables within the total energy mix, all of this relative to 1990. Within Germany, there's a desire to see this increased. The German feeling is that the 20% target for CO2 emission reduction is lower than it needs to be, that it could even be 25 or 30%. But at the moment, there's no consensus in Europe to moving towards a 30% target. What you see is that within the European context, there are different targets for each member state of the European Union, and together they add up to the 20%, 20%, 20% target. So if we look at the renewables, for example, we have a country like Sweden, which is bottom right, second from the bottom, which has a target of achieving 49% of its entire energy mix. That's transportation, heating sector, and electricity sector from renewables by 2020. For Germany, the target is only 18% because Germany doesn't have the same kind of hydro potential that Sweden does. But Germany has fairly strong climate action goals. Whereas the European goal is 20% reduction, the German goal is a 40% CO2 emission reduction relative to 1990. And this is with the idea that this is the only way to reach a 2-degree target, that this is the kind of signal that is necessary among the rich countries in order for the global community to achieve that 2-degree target. This is to be done with promotion of renewable energies, energy efficiency, higher energy standards for buildings, etc. It's also important to note that when this plan went into effect, it was with the idea that nuclear energy would continue and nuclear energy plants would be used for a longer period of time. But then the Fukushima nuclear explosions happened and policy changed in Germany. And so now the plan is to keep the CO2 emission reduction targets and at the same time phase out nuclear energy. If we look at the German climate change goals, what Germany has done has not been just to establish goals for 2020, but basically to backtrack from a 2050 position. 2050, in order to reach 2 degrees a 2-degree target, we need to reduce emissions by 80 to 95%. And so the German plan is actually looking at 2050 with a 2040 target and a 2030 target and a 2020 target. What you will see is that energy efficiency is considered a very important component of these targets. German energy efficiency is relatively high in international comparison. Nevertheless, there is much room for improving energy efficiency. And the goal is overall to reduce the amount of energy that is used to produce a product by at least 50% by 2050. This will mean improving energy efficiency at about 2.1% on average per year. This is a pretty tough target, and to be honest, Germany is having some difficulty at the moment in achieving that 2.1% per annum target. The other area that's very important is the development of renewable energies. Germany has a goal of achieving 80% of its electricity from renewables and 60% of its overall energy from renewables by 2050, with goals for the interim decades. This is to be done in addition to the nuclear phase-out. So basically what we have going on in Germany right now is an energy revolution. It's basically an effort to phase out nuclear and to phase out reliance on coal and oil in the next 40 years with 10-year targets for how to do it. It means that in Germany there's a lot of emphasis right now on development of offshore wind parks, on development of grid infrastructure in order to move renewable electricity from northern parts of the country to manufacturing sites in the southern part of the country, and to also find ways that we can store the electricity that is produced from renewables, because we know that the wind doesn't always blow and that the sun doesn't always shine. Germany is now in the process of actually trying to create more detailed plans for how this is to be implemented. I'll be honest and say it's not easy. One of the things you need is public acceptance for this kind of transition. One of the things you need is to have sufficient financial investment, and you also need to make sure that the price of electricity doesn't rise so much that people will lose their willingness to make the transition. But right now in Germany, there's a very strong will to phase out of nuclear energy and a very strong will to deal with climate change. And it's also at the local level. We see many local communities in Germany that are themselves coming up with plans for what they can do to meet 40% or higher CO2 emission reduction targets by 2020. And we see a lot of cities that are starting to create an image for the future by being sustainability cities. The other thing that we need to be thinking about is how to link this into a European context, because Germany is part of a broader European Union, and the energy efficiency goals and the renewable energy goals will work much better if this is done together with European neighbors. And so now one of the things Europe is starting on are negotiations about how does Europe as a whole improve its renewable energy infrastructure. And what we're seeing is that's starting to happen at the European institutional level, but we're also seeing it at the level of cities. It's very interesting that in 2009, a new network was created among European cities, and they already have over 4,000 members that have committed to achieving the European Union 20% target or more by 2020. So that's the condition in Europe. I think Europe is very eager to assure that the global community reaches a 2-degree target. Europe is somewhat frustrated because it feels that other parts of the global community are not necessarily willing to move along. And therefore, right now, there's a strong desire to say, let's just start doing it on our own. Let's stop just talking, let's take action, and perhaps by example convince others that it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miranda, for a very concise and to-the-point presentation. And I think she emphasized the importance of policy-centric approach. And at the last part of her presentation, she focused on a number of municipal level